Progress.
Hello and welcome. We'll take a few moments to let people join the webinar and then we will get started. Hello and welcome to TMA's Empowerment Clinic on Illness and Identity, Redefining Yourself. Today I have with me Ingrid de Groot and Terry Lewis. I'm Rachel Bromley. I'm TMA's Senior Manager of Patient Education, Support, and Advocacy. And I will let my guests introduce themselves. So Ingrid, we will start with you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, although I should say good afternoon, but I'm in the Netherlands. My name is Ingrid de Groot. I'm 53 years old, and I was diagnosed with dermatomyositis in 2006. And tonight I will tell you a bit more from my professional point of view about chronic illness and identity.
Wonderful. She is also a member of TMA's Medical Advisory Board. Okay, Terry, it is your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Lewis. I live in New Hampshire in the United States. I was diagnosed with IBM at about age 56, 2017, 62 years old now. And then I started having symptoms, as most people did, a long time before that. I can tell when I do my presentation, I'll tell a little bit more about my background and work experience. But I'm happy to be here with Rachel and Ingrid, and hope you're all doing well.
Yes. All right. So first, we are going to start with Ingrid's presentation. You can go ahead and share your screen. And if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to this TMA Empowerment Clinic on Illness and Identity, Redefining Who You Are. I will introduce myself again. So I'm Ingrid de Groot. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, or I used to be. I'm also a 53-year-old woman with myositis and a patient research partner. I chair the Dutch Myositis Working Group. And as Rachel said, I recently joined the Medical Advisory Board for TMA. I'm also in other projects. My myositis ended my professional career in 2006. And after years of multiple, in 2015, I'm sorry, I was diagnosed in 2006. After years of multiple hospital admissions and deteriorating health, and despite treatment, I got a disability pension. I decided to get involved in patient work, volunteering for the Dutch Patient Association initially. And to make a long story short, it snowballed into a lot of projects, myositis research projects, nationally and internationally. And some of which are listed here in the slide. And it's an honor that I'm with you today. And it's my first job as a person on the Medical Advisory Board. So I'm quite nervous, as you might notice. But now just let's start and see what appears to be a simple question, because today is about identity and chronic illness. So there are lots of definitions on identity. And I decided to stick with a short and easy one, because we can all relate to this one. Identity is being who or what a person or a thing is. And if I were to ask you individually what that would encompass, I bet there would be a great variety of answers. Because as you can see here, identity is made up of different levels or elements, as you wish, according to which you define yourself. For example, gender identity or race or professional identity, values, religious beliefs, personality, etc. Each of you has a unique individuality or identity, and some elements of this are more important to you than others. Another important word in today's clinic is chronic illness, which means basically a long-lasting condition which requires ongoing medical care and which may consistently limit the scope of a person's daily activities. We can all agree, I think, that myositis is a perfect example of such a chronic illness. I'm well aware that having IBM, for example, is very different than having dermatomyositis, juvenile dermatomyositis, antisynthetase syndrome, or immune-mediated necrotizing myopathy. However, there are similarities too. Living with a chronic illness typically requires lifestyle changes that can be stressful or at least challenging to adapt, such as taking your daily medication. In case of some types of myositis, unfortunately not in IBM, but also sticking to a new diet or an exercise regimen. And it also means limitations on your personal life, your professional or your social life. And since this is happening to you, not by choice, but by accident or bad luck, or however you call it, this can cause stress and anxiety and anger, and in some cases, even depression. And this is where chronic illness profoundly may affect your identity. And this is what's called illness identity. And this can be defined as the degree to which a person a chronic health condition such as myositis is integrated into someone's identity. Illness identity not only expresses how a person views the disease and the treatment, but also how much the disease has affected the way they think about themselves and the degree to which the illness becomes integrated into one's sense of self. Or in other words, it changes who we are across several spheres of life, affecting your lives in ways large and small. And not only our lives or your lives, but those of important and other loved ones as well, your partner, your family, your friends. And it's not a chosen experience. It is often an acutely distressing experience, and it becomes woven into the fabric of who you are. When I was still working, I heard many people describe experiencing the years after being diagnosed with a chronic illness as an abyss dividing their pre-illness self and post-illness self. And crossing this divide between the two, that's not easy. Another thing I want to pay attention to today is, when talking about identity, is body image. Although illness affects all of us at some point in our lives, it is socially a stigmatized condition, and those suffering from serious and chronic illnesses are often either marginalized or pitied, or even blamed for their ailments. The experience of illness itself may have a negative impact on people's self-concept, as they experience such things as pain and discomfort, changes in appearance, and a loss of control over their own bodies. Just as significantly, however, the social stigma that comes along with serious illness can deal a heavy blow to the self-esteem and body image. And in a society, as we all know, that values fit and healthy bodies and physical beauty and the importance of self-control, such bodily changes can be experienced as a humiliating personal failure. In addition, they serve as a constant reminder of one's poor and possibly deteriorating health. For many people, the many physical changes that occur with serious and chronic illness are psychologically devastating. And in case of myositis, there are a couple of things you might think of. Rapid weight loss, for example, due to severe dysphagia and IBM, or weight gain or bloating, which is seen in people treated with high doses of prednisone. And think of the skin abnormalities that people with dermatomyositis can experience: the rash, the baldness, the visible calcinosis. And then there, of course, is limited or lost mobility and the use of aids like a crutch or a rollator or a wheelchair. limited or lost control of bodily functions, like the inability to bend fingers in IBM and put down your signature, you can imagine what that can do to your self-esteem. Both the physical experience of illness and the social stigma attached to illness can have negative psychological effects. And these may include feelings of fear, of rejection, or of loss of control over body and emotions, difficulties maintaining normal social interactions, loss of self-esteem with a sense of being different or deficient or unattractive. And there is social stigma too. Such physical changes also attract a range of responses from others: pity, fear, avoidance, and even anger. And when faced with a person in a wheelchair due to a myopathy, for instance, some people are disturbed at the thought that this could happen to them as well, or to someone they love. Contact with the illness forces them to confront their own mortality. So now that we know a bit more about identity and its illness and its elements and contributing factors, I want to tell you a little bit about illness identity states. Now, as I forgot to say in the introduction because I was nervous, I'm wearing two hats tonight. I'm a social worker and a counselor, but I'm also a patient with myositis. So I go through these states with you. I explain to you what they are, and I give some personal examples every time so that you can sort of relate to what I'm saying. So the illness identity states that researchers have established, there are 4 of them, and I think a lot of you will recognize most of it. And it's also a disclaimer. You would expect that with 2 bachelor degrees in the area of psychosocial health and counseling, I would know how to deal with these things. And let me tell you, I do not. I turned out to be just like any of you, and I'm trying to do the best whenever I could. So first, there is rejection. I think we can all relate to that. It encompasses a refusal to accept the myositis as part of one's identity. The illness is seen as incompatible with one's sense of self. People in a rejection state either refuse to believe they have an illness, or they minimize the illness impact. Their inability to integrate illness into their daily lives and into their identity leads to choices that adversely affect their health. You can think of examples like they tend not to follow treatment regimens or lifestyle changes that support their health. An example from my personal life: despite many hospital admissions and warnings from the doctors, I kept working full-time for quite some time after diagnosis. If I were honest, I knew I was not coping, but the thought of not being able to work was too terrifying. And so I kept going as if myositis wasn't there. But then something else happens to many people with a chronic illness: the engulfment state. It is the opposite of rejection. In this state, illness overwhelmingly dominates life. It becomes a preoccupation. Other aspects of identity, such as relationships, work, or hobbies, they're all ignored. And understandably, depression and anxiety increase in this engulfment state. I remember becoming obsessed with surfing the internet for information on myositis, on its causes, on its treatments, on research, anything to do with myositis. And I was on partial sick leave by then, and after sleeping in the afternoon, my time was spent almost entirely with all things related to myositis. But then comes the much desired state of acceptance. This involves an acceptance of the illness as part of one's identity. Illness is neither ignored nor all-consuming. Grief is part of true acceptance too, as is a move toward healthy adaptations. Depression and anxiety decrease for those in an acceptance state. And this I remember well. I was grieving because I knew I needed to stop my professional career. Like I had stopped playing some of my favorite sports before, but by that time I had already found that I could do voluntary work. and different outdoors activities that still offered a sense of fulfillment and meaningfulness. And what really helped me realizing was that I have myositis instead of I am myositis. This means that it only makes a part of what and who I am. But I'm so much more than that, a loving wife and daughter, a good friend, I hope, a coach for my netball team, a patient advocate, a patient research partner. And finally, there is enrichment, where there is recognition that positive changes have occurred as a result of the illness. These changes may include increases in resilience strength, a renewed appreciation for life, and the clarification of values. Improved well-being is associated with the with this illness identity state. And I can honestly say that I've reached this state too, and I'm lucky. And on some, maybe even many points, my life has changed in a positive way. I would now score my life the same as before myositis. Despite having lost many things, I've gained lots as well. I now do things I have never done before, personally, socially, and professionally. I'm still helping other people, like back when I was paid to do so. I have met so many beautiful people along the way, enriching my life, and still have the same loving people supporting me as when this all started. Now, as you can imagine, going through all these states, it's what I used to call during my working time a mental workout. And it's an ongoing process, and we hold within us all of these states, each one of you, simultaneously, with a different state moving into the foreground at different times. When the myositis is very active or flaring up, or in case of IBM, you had a fall, it makes sense that you would feel engulfment. It's difficult to enjoy the other aspects of your identity when you're in a crisis. And when your illness is more stable, of course, it's easier to lean toward acceptance or even enrichment states. And it's useful to identify your baseline predominant states. And I will tell you why. Because if you're consistently in rejection or engulfment states, it is important to be curious about that. It may be that the myositis or the pain is not controlled sufficiently, necessitating a medical consultation. Or it may be that it's been difficult to move through a grieving process about all the losses caused by myositis, necessitating a consultation with a counselor or a therapist. Even if your baseline predominant states is accepted and or enrichment, there will be times when you'll feel strongly the wish to reject the myositis and your illness identity or become engulfed by it. And recognize and name those states every time again, allowing yourself to feel the grief that is part of living with myositis. Living with chronic illness is complicated. It's a lifelong journey, and understanding that these illness identity states are expected parts of the journey that might help you. It can ease the way. So your personal journey and what I hope might help you to reach your destination. Just as there are steps for grieving the loss of a loved one, it is important to allow yourself space to grieve the loss of your pre-illness identity. Anger, depression, fear, it is all normal to deal with a roller coaster of emotions. You may find yourself feeling sad one moment and angry the next. Let yourself feel these complex jumbles of emotions. It's not uncommon to reevaluate your goals. The tasks now become finding new meaning to life in the midst of what you've had to shift. And that is not simple. Coping with a new normal is a challenge that looks different to everyone. So take time to shift your attention to things you still have, or the parts of your new normal that you really appreciate or even enjoy. And find distraction in other activities, on your own or with others, and connecting with people that you feel can hear and understand you is invaluable. Whether that's a mental health professional, a support group, a friend, a family member, it doesn't matter. The key is to find a space where you feel comfortable to share. And if people are willing to help, please accept their help. Often, not only in the Netherlands where we're sort of conditioned to do this, I think the US is the same, or worldwide. We're conditioned to handle all of life challenges primarily on our own. But managing a chronic illness like myositis is a challenge that may require more support. So ask for help if needed, and please accept it when offered. Take your time and find out what works for you. And an important thing that I would like to share with you, because personally it helped me a lot, researchers have found that in coping with a chronic illness and other adverse life events in general, 3 elements are important for being able to cope. These are resilience, gratitude, and intimacy. Try and find ways how to embrace these elements. And this may sound like stating the obvious, but prepare for the unpredictability. The only certainty you'll have is that there is no certainty. And personally, I found a lot of comfort in a mantra I adopted early on in my personal journey. When nothing is sure, everything is possible. And maybe you can think of a helpful mantra for you too. Sorry. So now I'd like to end my presentation with words and thoughts of hope and empowerment. Discussions around chronic illness are largely focused on the negative. However, there is also an opportunity in this shift in your world. There is a chance to discover new parts of yourself and a new lens from which to gain perspective. Maybe the challenge of having to make a career switch led you to advocacy work, or maybe your social ventures have narrowed, but you've gained a community of people that really understand and appreciate you for who you are. Maybe you have more gratitude for the small joys in your life that you once took for granted. Your story does not end here. It can be rewritten. Remember that whatever you're feeling is valid, and there's not one recipe to cope and live your life with a chronic illness. Explore and discover what works for you. The road ahead may not be the one you imagined, but there are opportunities for a path that is still enriching and meaningful. So my messages of hope and empowerment, not only from myself, but also what I learned from others dealing with a chronic illness, is you are not alone. This might be an opportunity to discover new parts of yourself and a new lens from which to gain perspective. It's a chance to reevaluate what is meaningful in life, but also a chance to reevaluate who is meaningful to you. And definitely hopeful is the so-called disability paradox. And I like to share it with you because it sometimes gives me some sort of comfort. It describes the gap between what people without serious and persistent disabilities believe and what people with these disabilities actually experience. And for those who are still skeptical when I say this, there is robust evidence that shows that well-being is not impacted by ill health. Studies show that there is little correlation between objective health and well-being. And some studies have found that happiness levels dip at diagnosis and symptoms appearance, but this effect disappears within a year, during which happiness levels return to baseline. This can be explained by people adapting to and therefore ceasing to feel the impact of changes to things that affect us. And finally, what I really would like to say to you, there is no right or wrong way to deal with this situation. And this is it from me for now. I hope this was in some way helpful to you. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, go ahead and stop sharing. And I've got a question from the audience. If any of you have a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. But the question is, are you suggesting that the illness identity states are sequential and linear, or do you find that they are not linear and may recur as one's illness progresses?
Yeah, I would say they're not linear. It's not it's the way that I mentioned them. It's the way that most people go, but as the myositis can present itself in so many ways, and there's beside the myositis, apart from that, you have a personal life, you have a family life, a professional life. So a lot of things may happen at the same time, which can all affect these illness identity states and your personality, your identity. So it's not per se linear, I would say. To me, I could relate to it, but I hear from people that they shift from one to the other or experience two at the same time. It can all, there's no definite way of how it's working out, and you see as you go, basically.
When I first thought of doing this particular empowerment clinic, I had a couple of conversations with people about identity, and actually I was surprised to find that some people felt very strongly about their identity and that they did not need to redefine it in any way. And there's actually someone in the audience that shares this view, and I just wanted to have different views on identity. So Lori, if you're there, I can allow you to talk if you want to share your view.
Sure. Whoops, let me turn on my camera, or for some reason.
You don't have to.
Okay.
Your voice is fine.
Okay.
Hi, Laura.
I think it's really helpful to develop skills or develop tools around how we cope or how we meet these different challenges. And for me, my background, I've had a lot of experience with mindfulness and compassion practices. And one of the things is, as Ingrid was saying, is recognizing that things are constantly changing. And so the certainty is that everything is uncertain. And so as we embrace the illness, I think one of the things that's been helpful for me is just recognizing the things that are going to change. And rather than being resistant to that change, is to be able to open to that change. And I think Ingrid mentioned something that was really helpful, which was about being curious instead. Like what is this inviting me to explore? And of course, there might be grief, there might be some pain, there might be emotional challenges, but there's also the opportunity to explore how those might help you grow and find other ways of being in the world that aren't anchored into that identity of I am my myositis. Instead, as Ingrid was suggesting, that we don't have to be attached to that. And so the illness I don't let the illness define me, but instead it's like, okay, this is a part of what I have to experience, but it's not necessarily my identity. That doesn't dominate or doesn't limit who I can be outside of that. So I think I'll leave it there and then, see what other people think. But I think for me, having a lot of tools around mindfulness, around compassion, particularly self-compassion, has been really helpful. One of the things that I would love to see is support groups where people can bring perhaps the emotional challenges in a way that doesn't have people trying to fix each other, but instead learning how to support one another. And that's a whole different set of skills and tools. And Ingrid would probably have a lot to say about that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lori. We really appreciate you sharing your input. Ingrid, did you want to respond?
No, thank you, Laura. That's beautiful what you were just saying. And I didn't mention the mindfulness and self-compassion, but I'm a big fan of those. And when I first was invited to do this, to host this webinar, this empowerment clinic, I was struggling a bit with the redefining your identity as well, because I never experienced it as such, as redefining myself, but more as adapting to a change, which in this case was myositis, but it could have been really literally anything, because that's what life is about. It just, things happen to you one way or another. So yeah, so I totally agree with you, and thank you for sharing. And I applaud your initiative for a workshop where it is on supporting instead of fixing a problem. Yeah.
Okay, someone would like your slides. So if you could, if you don't mind, not sharing them now, but you can email them
Yep.
to me if you don't mind, and I
Yep.
can get it out to the people who would like it. And we also have Terry Lewis with us. Terry, hi, how are you?
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Great. So should we have you, should I ask you the questions or should you do your slide first? What do you think?
Yeah, I think probably the slide will come in at some point where it's appropriate. So we can just
Okay,
kind of.
yeah, whenever you want to, just bring it on in. So,
Okay.
why don't you tell us a little bit about how your diagnosis came about and how it changed your life?
Sure. There's a lot there, but I'll try to make it short and simple. I back in 2014, 2015, I started experiencing some weird symptoms, which I just thought were aging. I think this is what everybody goes through. Like you start feeling weakness. I used to ride. I was a cyclist. I would ride 100 miles a week. No big deal. And I was in good shape and fit and everything. And I was working as an executive at a large insurance company in Boston. Everything was going along great, and things just started getting harder for me. Steps got harder. And then in 2016, out of the blue, I really didn't have any blood pressure problems with all the exercise and stuff, but I got this hypertensive crisis, put me in the hospital for about a week trying to get my blood pressure down. And at the time I was ready to leave the hospital, they were checking me out and found that I could barely walk. They were going to send me home with a walker. I was like, what the heck is going on? This doesn't make any sense. But I left there, got a little bit better, started seeing a neurologist, trying to figure out what was going on. The neurologist, the first one I went to, couldn't figure it out. And so he referred me to a Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, which is a big teaching hospital in New Hampshire. Anyway, so I went there, and over the course of a couple of years, I went through the electrolysis test. I went through blood tests. I went through, finally, 2 biopsies later, they diagnosed that it was IBM. It came out that way. And so now I knew I had a diagnosis for what was going on, and I was still, struggling. I couldn't ride my bike anymore. I couldn't hike anymore. It was just really, this is when I started to feel the effects mentally and emotionally of this diagnosis, because I was working and going right along and doing my job and everything. And I think rejection, Ingrid, was the stage I was in at that point. I was like, this isn't happening to me. I can work through this. I'm Superman. I can do whatever I need to do and make it work. But it became progressively harder. The fatigue was just really difficult. Experienced a lot of pain in my arms and legs, weakness, sleep problems, all the stuff that goes along with IBM. And I eventually got to the point where I'm not going to be able to work anymore unless I do something. So I went on short-term disability for 6 months, tried to take care of my health, came back to work for 6 months. Same thing happened, couldn't get out of it, couldn't overcome it. Took another 6 months off, and then finally went on long-term disability and ended up retiring with an early retirement program from my company. And then at that point, I really started to feel, I guess I would say it was engulfment, Ingrid, at that point, because I was really down. I'd lost my hobbies. I lost a job that I loved. You know, the means for providing for my family, everything else is just, I was really feeling bad about it. And I withdrew from life for a year. The COVID was going on. I guess that's a good excuse, because I retired in 2020. And but I really pulled back from everything. I had a church group that I'd been active in. You know, all the friendships and hobbies and all this stuff. I just kind of, I guess I was moping around feeling sorry for myself, rightly so, I think. But it was a very difficult period of time for me. And I started to see a therapist and to talk through, because I was grieving quite a bit. And I really didn't know what to do with myself. I was always so active. I had a full life, day till dawn. I'm just really busy and things that I loved. And now there was just this gap. What am I going to do with myself? So I started seeing a therapist. And I think this might be a good time to bring up my slide, because what this therapist helped me do is work through, share my screen. Yeah, this is what she asked me a question one time. She said, "What does success look like for you?" And I thought, well, that's a big question. That's a really big question. And I started thinking about my previous life, call it a previous life, I guess, but my life before my disease. And what about that brought me joy, brought me satisfaction. And so I worked through that, and this is what I came up with: is a successful, healthy me would be capable. So I put like these little mantras together. I'm a healthy, able man. All right. And I know that myositis makes it so you can't do some things, but I can be healthy, within what I'm able to do, and I can be able, because I'm able to do some things. It doesn't stop me from, I didn't have to withdraw completely from life like I did. Dignity is interesting. In my work, I felt like, as an executive, I was respected. I had a great team. You know, I did work in the United States and 18 different countries I was responsible for. But I changed that around. Dignity is, I respect who I am and what I do. I don't have to have the respect of other people, because I know myself best, and I know if I'm I have integrity and do what I want. So I respect myself and who I am and what I do. And then I had been involved, as an executive, what I was responsible for was leadership development. And that meant growing managers and new managers and helping managers move up to higher levels of management. It was always really satisfactory to me, because I could watch people grow. But you know what? Now that I'm not doing that anymore, I can still be that person that helps others be better. With just one-on-one interactions with people, working with my church, doing what I can to contribute, but I can still be involved and help others be better. And then the other thing is, I want to be growing. I don't want to stagnate and sit around just being where I am. So I put down that I try new things, I create and pursue intellectual challenges. And that took me, a couple months to sit down and really think about and be mindful about. Once I put that down on paper, it sort of changed me. And I was living in a threat state before. Like I said, I pulled back. I stopped doing the things that I enjoyed. And now putting these 4 things down, I started thinking, you know what, I'm going to live in an active state. I'm going to pursue these things. And that's going to change my life. And it did. It changed my life. I went on a diet where I don't eat sugar, and I don't eat processed food, and I don't eat grains. And I lost 50 pounds, and boy, did that help my myositis. I'm so much more active. I got an e-bike. I was like, you know what? I couldn't do my old biking, but yeah, I can get on an e-bike and I can ride around. So I started doing that. I got involved in my church group, asked them to give me a job in the church, and I'm doing a job now, kind of an administrative job for them, which keeps me involved and happy. And it just went through. I have my intellectual challenges and challenge myself on I found some podcasts that I really like. Some of them are on health, some of them are on improvement, some of them are on history. But I got my mind active again instead of being kind of pulled back and everything like that. And then I looked at my roles, what are important to me. So my church is important to me. I'm a husband. I want to be a really good husband. I'm a father. I want to be a great father and a grandfather. And so I started using these 4 things in those contexts of my roles. And so, I mean, that's kind of where I got to. So I would say I did go through acceptance of my disease, but I think I was still in a threat state, and living in that threat state for a long time and just pulling back from life. But now I think I am, at a lot of times, I don't always stay in it, but I'm in that enrichment. I do gardening, which is really satisfying. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my family, not having to work. I get to do that now. And, all of this is really, I don't know. I think just asking that question, what does success look like for you? Was a thing that kicked it all off for me. And so, Rachel, that's kind of my story and how I got to where I am today.
Thank you so much. You can stop sharing your slide, and if you could also send that to me, and I will send it on with Ingrid's slides.
Will do.
And I was curious because you talk about this journey, and it sounds like you went through all the illness identity states. How long did it take you, do you think? What was that process? Was that a couple of years? Was it 6 months? I mean, what?
I would say, I think I got my solid diagnosis in 2017. And I rejected that all the way up until I was brought to the point where I couldn't work anymore. That would be 2 years, like 2019. And then I started, even then I was trying to bargain with myself saying, okay, I'll take 6 months off, get my health back, and then I'll be able to work again. And I did that twice. So that was still sort of a rejection there. But then if you look at engulfment, so that would have been part of 2019 and all of 2020, where I just pulled back from everything. And so, yeah, and that's probably 18 months of that for me. And acceptance and enrichment kind of came together. I retired in 2021. I didn't really figure out everything on like I have on that slide till middle of 2022. So I'm good probably another year to 18 months on that one, in that acceptance stage. But I've just started this enrichment, I guess I would say. That was about 6-8 months ago, where I felt like,
Is there a way to fast track the process, or do you just have to be patient with yourself?
It's work in progress.
I know the answer to that, but I wanted everybody else to hear it.
I think it's work in progress, and it's a beautiful story by Terry. I can see that it's, and I think Terry agrees that it's a work in progress. And as I told during my presentation, that things happen with the myositis or other things in life that makes that things change again. Also in the illness identity states, if you have a flare or a fall or something else happens, you drop back again, and it feels like way back. But the thing that I've learned is that, because I've experienced before that you can reach the acceptance and enrichment state, that's a comforting thought. So when I have a flare, or I was admitted with COVID last summer and I was really ill and the myositis got worse, really bad. But I knew that I could recover if I allowed myself time and compassion and yeah, so be patient. And I don't think there's a way to fast track, but maybe people think different about it. But
I got,
can therapy, I would think that maybe if whether you did go to therapy or didn't go to therapy would make a big difference.
Well, it depends. Some people do need therapy, other people don't. They stick to mindfulness or self-compassion or supporting, looking for support in other people or in their religious beliefs or other values that they, so I don't think there is in that way. As long as, I think anything that helps you come to terms with what you're feeling at the moment is helpful. And in that way, you could say it's sort of making things go faster, or at least better, I think.
Yeah, I'll just add this also, Ingrid. I think experience helps me too, because I've learned more about myself and learned more about my disease. And I still have, I know people say IBMs don't have flares, but I have a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks at a time when I just feel terrible and I can't do much. But I know that I'll pull out of it because of experience. You know, my track record, that's happened to me many times over the last, 8 years or whatever. And so you learn to, you know yourself, and that's going to help you too. I think the more experience you have with the disease and how to manage it, the better off you are.
Yeah, I agree.
And of course, I'm biased, but I think the sooner you find TMA, the better, right?
Yeah, well, that's definitely, but it's important. That's what I say. You need support. You really need support one way or the other. And TMA is great. Or if people from different countries are watching us with us today, there are patient support groups in many countries. So yeah, definitely.
I'm gonna agree with you. I think TMA is great. I will say that when I first joined and I was early on in my disease and I saw people with Hoyer lifts and all this other stuff, it scared me to death. Because I thought, well, that's my future, and I know it still is, but it's
Well,
just,
that's the thing. I talked with, I had some webinar with Dr. Julie Peck from Johns Hopkins. And she had some information that of IBMers, only 11% end up in wheelchairs. That means 89% do not. And that is a message that I really want to get out, because your experience has been a lot of people's experience. Is why maybe they don't go to the conferences. They automatically think, oh, that's going to be my journey. That's what it's going to look like. And, they're not ready for that. So
yeah,
I'm trying to get that new messaging out. So, because.
Yeah, and that's good. And that's exactly why I also mentioned the disability paradox, because a lot of people think that when you're facing an illness like myositis, your quality of life must get worse because, this is about the worst thing that can happen to you. But basically it's not. Well-being is not like very linear with your health condition. So
yeah,
I think that's hopeful.
it is.
Yes.
I read it where it's most of the time a slower moving disease is also a, it doesn't happen to you like overnight, I guess, the journey. Thank you.
We have another question come in. I am going to email that one to you. It's about your work on the MAB. So Ingrid, I will send that one to you, and you can mull it over and get back to her. So does anyone else have any questions or final thoughts? If you're in the audience and you know how to raise your hand and would like to share something, I can allow you to talk. At the bottom of your screen should be a little icon that says raise hand. Okay, well, Terry, why don't you go first with your last words? We've given out a lot of advice for people struggling with identity, but what are some final words you'd like to share?
Well, at first I thought it was a new identity, but the more I thought about it, it's taking the things that are most important to me and translating them into the new world, the new circumstances that I've given. I'm still the same person I always was. I have some limits to my abilities, but I figured out what's important to me and what success looks like. And I think that is kind of the key in the game. If we spend some time thinking about that, it'll make a big difference. It did for me.
Wonderful, thank you. And Ingrid?
Yeah, I agree with what Terry is saying, and I think that I went through all the stages I talked about, and it started with me with mostly negative feelings, but eventually I learned that every time I experienced like a setback or a loss, I found other positive or meaningful things instead. So it enriched me too. And what really helped me were those, it was in the advice I gave people, that resilience, gratitude, and intimacy really helped me. So every day I still count my blessings despite the myositis, for the things that I still can do and the people I still meet and along my journey. So yeah.
Everyone else is saying just thank you so much. Very valuable info. They're just excited to hear what you had to share today and want to thank you for your time. And I will thank you for your time as well. I really appreciate seeing the both of you today and you sharing your journeys. And it's just so incredible, especially Ingrid, to have someone who's a myositis researcher and a patient at the same time, because you really do have that wealth of experience to speak from both sides of the aisle. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's why I'm really appreciating the invitation to become part of the medical board. And that's partly a question to an answer to one of the questions I saw in the chat, that are real champion for psychosocial support and themes and issues like this that we discussed today. So thank you for that.
All right, well, thank you. And thanks to everyone out there in the audience. Tune in. I'm not sure when our next webinar is. I think it's going to be a myositis research webinar. Oh, no, May 4th, we have updates in dermatomyositis with Dr. Ruth Ann Vlugels. So that's May 4th. You can tune into that. All right, thank you so much. For TMA, I'm Rachel Bromley. Good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.